We have completed the course introduction, and now we are going to open the program Revit. After we open the program, we're going to work on a project where you will understand ordering systems, axis, symmetry, hierarchy, and rhythm. Once Revit opens, we are going to start a new model. Go to the left-hand side, drop down New, and here it is very important that we browse for the correct template. We're going to click Browse, and it's Commercial Default. If you do not begin in this project, all of your icon organization through the project browser is going to be very different than what I teach. Let's open that. Hit OK. And we come to the first screen in Revit. When we come to the first opening screen in Revit, I'm going to describe 3 different areas of this program that I will refer to. The first is the top. All of these tabs across the top, beginning with architecture, and the icons below them will be referred to as a ribbon. The Properties browser and the Project browser are items that can be located anywhere. Mine are banked on the left. If you click on the top bar and remove it, you can locate this on any screen or in any position you care to. When I'm working on a small screen, I like to bank them on top of one another and flip between tabs, Properties, and Project browser. We are going to draw shapes using the keyboard shortcut LI for line. So let's type in LI, and you'll notice that in our ribbon, the Modify Place Lines is highlighted in a tab. Anytime you accidentally click off a tab and you don't know what command you're in, just look at the ribbon to see which one is highlighted and click back on that one. It defaults to line, so let's experiment with a few lines in any shape. I hit Escape to get out of that command. Take a few minutes and draw each one of these shapes in this tab. Once you have a sufficient number of shapes, I'd like you to pay attention to the dimensions that show up as we draw. If you've hit Escape and are out of the command, simply type LI to draw lines again. And let's draw a line. We'll begin the line, and you can see the dimension in the X or Y axis. But if I type 25 using my keyboard, and then the 1 tick mark to represent feet, and hit Enter, it draws a line at exactly 25 feet. Simply just by escaping and clicking on it, I can verify that dimension. The next thing I'd like you to do is to grab one shape. To create selections, you can choose boxes by clicking on the left side of it, holding down the button of your mouse and letting that go. Any box that you drag left to right, so I'm clicking, dragging, and letting go, selects anything within that entity. If, on the other hand, I draw a box in the opposite direction, so I'll click, drag left, anything that that box intersects with, it doesn't have to be the entire object, will be selected. So experiment with that for a second by grabbing. grab an object and hit Control-C. That will create a copy. Hitting Control-V and touching the screen creates a duplicate. Through our university Blackboard, you have access to every PDF of each lecture. Everything I move through in Revit can be found on that PDF so that you can follow along. So here's what I've just done. Open Revit, Models New, Commercial Default, Project Template, and next we're going to move into how to save this in our university system. Let's create a 3D object now. These are called component models. So for component model, the shortcut is CM. CM. We want to model in place. So you'll notice that once I type that in, the ribbon is highlighted. We're going to select Model in Place and choose Casework. These can be many different things as you see the many different categories. For our generic 3D model, we'll choose Casework. Hit OK. And Casework 1 or 2 is fine. Let's hit OK. That's its name. You'll notice that the ribbon and your screen has grayed out. This means, again, that we are in a command. To get out of this command once we've drawn, we will hit this green check mark. We are going to create a model, so let's go to the Create tab. We're going to do an extrusion. Click Extrusion. And a similar box on the far right-hand side of our ribbon shows the same line type tools that we've become familiar with. Let's draw a simple rectangle. And you'll notice that that rectangle now has a Z dimension. It has a height of 10. We can hit the check mark. Once again. And let's see what this looks like in 3D. We've only been working in 2D so far. And we can find the 3D element view, the model view, in two ways. Just above the ribbon, there's a default 3D view icon of a house. And you'll notice that everything that we've drawn so far can be viewed in 3D. Another way of flipping back and forth between the two drawings that we have open, you'll see the tabs below the ribbon, is to hold Control Tab. So if I push Control and hold that down and tap Tab once, I can flip through both my Level 1 view and my 3D view. The last way that you can find drawings and move between them is to use the project browser. So let's look. I am in the project browser on the left side of my screen. And I notice that I have floor plans. I can minimize or expand these. And I've got lots of different types of drawings here. The only ones that we've worked in so far, though, is the Level 1 floor plan and the 3D view. So I can expand that and get back to this same screen that way as well. Referring back to the PDF on Blackboard, you can see the list of items that we've just gone through. Let's experiment with some additional 3D forms and try to find a few that allow us to have voids and negative spaces. You'll see that I have created additional 3D forms as an experiment here, and we'll be doing one of these together. So these are component models. I've made an extrusion, And then I've created a void before closing the application of creating a component model. Let's go back to the level 1 view floor plan. Type CM for component model. We are model in place. Casework again. And then the Create tab. Let's select extrusion. Draw a cylinder this time. Depth of 10 is fine. We will hit the check mark once just so that we can go back to create. Let's notice that we've got lots of form options in the ribbon. I need to be in this component model. You cannot close it before you do the void form. So check mark only once to get me here. Create tab. Let's click on void form, void extrusion. You may draw any shape. I'll choose rectangle. Within that cylinder, click the check mark once. And before we click this final check mark, why don't we take a look at what this seems to be and looks like in 3D. So I'm zooming in and out. I can click the cylinder, which has tabs that would allow me to change its size and shape. I will hit Control Z to go back. Or I can hover around the void, which also has tabs that allow it to change shape. If I bring that void through the edge of my cylinder, the void cuts. Let's rotate around our objects now. Let's hit the check mark first. And I want you to scroll with your mouse in and out. If you want to move left and right, push down the Control, up scroll, and move your cursor again, left and right. If you want to rotate around one object, click on the object. I find that that controls the scroll a bit easier. And try touching Shift as you push down the mouse scroll. You can also use the cube in the upper right-hand corner of your screen to rotate as well. If you click any face of that cube, it will bring you to a perfect view. That's the top. I'm using Shift and pushing down the middle of my scroll. If I want a front view, I simply touch the front of the cube. I'm going to give you a few minutes to experiment with other extruded forms. Architect Aldo Rossi has a secondary school in Brawny, Italy, and we're going to use it as inspiration to create some of the forms that you can see in the image. I'd like you to focus on the flat plane first. So we've got a tall 2-story wall, a window on the 2nd story, a triangular extrusion going into a water feature well. Begin with those features, and if you're drafting quicker than your classmates, move on to only one side of the wall. We're all going to get these elements, and then we will learn mirroring, grouping, how to create text in Revit, rotate, and dimension. We're going to use the same 3D form to begin that flat front wall first. I use DI dimension and touch the top and bottom line in order to find the dimension. I created it at a perfect 18 inches by just selecting the bottom line. I have a lot of 3D forms here. I'm going to clean up my sheet before we start developing Rossi's wall of the school. As I select it, you'll see that the tabs would allow me to correct the height and width. However, I find in the south view, I can manipulate that plane at its accurate size best. All I did was double click on the triangle of the south view. You could also find that in your project browser. I adjusted the roof height to be 24 and pulled the top tab up to match that height. So here's what we have in 3D. I double-clicked the object to get into it so that I could create the extrusion. I touched the void form, and sometimes it's difficult in 3D to be exact, so I moved back to the 2D in order to draw that extrusion on top of the first form. I'd like this to be in the middle of the wall, so I can use DI dimension and touch every vertical line right to left. I then grab the middle rectangle extrusion, and guess what? You can use the right and left arrows of your keyboard to move that if you don't want to touch the dimension line and change it numerically. We'll hit the check mark and take a look at where our extrusion is in 3D. Using the tabs, you can correct its height and pull it all the way through the wall. I'll hit the check mark to end. Here, I tiled the windows by TW so that I can see two views at once. With two screens, this is much easier. To go back, you would use the reverse, WT. Tile window, window tile would get you out. Okay, so we're looking at that wall in the top view. I want to begin creating additional extrusions, the triangular extrusion and the well. Because I want to create this in the middle of the wall, I use what's called snaps. Just hovering your cursor around the middle of the wall gives you that triangular symbol, meaning that you've achieved this in a central location. The well has a hole in it for the water, so I will create another extruded void. This is really tall. I can touch it, use tabs to correct the height. It snaps to the bottom of the wall. So here I used keyboard shortcut KS to get to this screen. In order to create objects on certain faces, we can either select the face or create a reference plane. Sometimes I use KS, this keyboard shortcut, which you can see at the top of the box, in order to figure out where buttons are in Revit too. And create it on the wall. So this gives me two options for how to locate that triangular extrusion. I'm going through the project browser In order to find the front elevation, or I can go in level 1 and double click the 1 in that triangular symbol. It will bring me to the same south elevation. I go to CM, Component Model, Model in Place, and this time I will create it as a wall. When I hit Extrusion, here's where you can pick a plane or use reference. In order to grab that wall, I just hovered on the edge and tapped Tab a few times. Then the program allows me to begin drawing the triangle out of lines. I hit the check once, but I need an extrusion. Again, I pick the plane by hovering along the edge, tab, and tapping. And this time I'm going to use this pick lines in order to offset a dimension. It's maybe 4 inches or 8 inches. It looks like 8 inches is too much. So in the left-hand side, change the offset to 4, tap existing lines to get a perfect offset, which still looks a little too big. I adjust it, hit the check mark, scroll out, and then you'll notice that it's too far in the 3D view. Again, this lesson today is not about accurate dimensions, but just becoming familiar with the program. So you can work in plan, elevation, which I find you can control the location better. Or if you want 3D view, utilize that cube so you can have perfect top views, front views, etc. The dimensioning tool, however, only works in elevations and plans. If you want to dimension anything, tap DI for dimension. The well is a little larger, so in plan, I will use the tabs to visually correct it. Scaling does not work. So again, I'll use the tabs to correct the size of the triangular water feature. I'm going to correct the proportions of my back wall as well. Again, I'm just using arrows to push that extrusion left or right. You can create mass models not only by CM, but also by this Massing and Site tab. On the left of the ribbon, you'll notice In Place Mass. This is a more complicated way, but it gives you the ability to do more complicated forms. When you select it, you'll notice that the keys are similar. After creating the form, you must select the entire form. So I've selected it, and then I use this drop-down Create Form to create a solid. And you'll notice a few additional tools to pull in many directions. Let's finish the mass. You may have noticed that Aldo Rossi's building had crown molding at the top. Revit calls this a sweep, and we can create wall sweeps. I selected the mass and then hovered around Create a Wall from Mass, dropped down the Wall tab under Architecture to find the sweep. So the massing and site, in conclusion, allows us to create walls from the form. Here, instead of an extruded void, we could use the wall opening tool under the Architecture tab, right side of the ribbon, to do a very similar thing as to what we did with the component model. I'm going to delete the sweep, but use this wall and wall opening in order to create the left and right arms of this interior courtyard. Here I typed in RO for rotate. This is in the Modify tab if you'd rather use a button with this circle. I select the object, hit the space bar to locate the point from which I want to rotate, begin the rotation, and type in 90 degrees. I can MV, move that wall, or simply drag it. The elevations are incorrect, but I can touch the wall, use the cube to align it correctly to the base and head of the wall. That wall opening is in the wrong location, but again, I can simply touch and grab and use the tabs in order to create the right proportion. Aligning the cube on the right side allows me to CO, copy, grab an edge, and copy the opening. The opening can even overlap the wall. It just creates a cut. Now I see there are openings at the floor level. So by holding down Control, I add many forms before I use the copy command, select the openings and drag them to the base of the wall to create openings. Now I promised we would use the mirror tool. The great thing about drafting and not drawing is that we draft it. Mirroring is easy in plan because I can dictate a point from which I mirror about. I select the wall and look to the center of the ribbon. To the mirroring draw axis with the pencil, I locate the center of the wall so that I know it's mirroring exactly about the center. And now I have my courtyard. If I want the courtyard to move all together, I'm going to type in GP for group. This makes it a group. I just have to select one edge and I can drag or move the entire thing. To ungroup, I can simply touch the ungroup button or use the keyboard short command UG. I'd like to create text. Again, best in plan or elevation. To give this a name, I'm simply going to type in TX for text, click the cursor once, and type in Aldo Rossi's Secondary School. I click my cursor out of it to get me out of the text command and hit escape. Finally, dimensioning again. DI. You can do an entire string by continuing to click on lines parallel to your first selection. Using dimensions allow you to have very accurate drawings in Revit. Now we'd like to turn this in. You have a few options here. You can take a snip tool by hitting the Window tab and typing in snip. Select New and grab the part of your screen that you wish to save. Control S saves that to a location. Or we can export directly from Revit by going to the File, Export tool, and looking for the PDF. Once you select the PDF, just make sure you understand where you're locating it. At the bottom, you will click Export, and it will save to the file. It will save to the proper place. This is what the PDF should look like in your PDF viewer, and it's part of what you'll use to submit your work.